What's going on, guys? It's Karl here, back with another episode, and the one that you're looking to see if you're in the market for the new 2018 MacBook Pros. I know that I just did a couple unboxings, my first look at some of them. We've got the three main ones here that have been updated. We of course have the 13-inch with touch bar, the only 13-incher that got a spec bump, the baseline 15-inch, and of course, the grail that everyone wants to hear about, the fully spec'd out i9 that is close to 10,000 Benjamin buttons. Hoping that this video helps some of you out in your decision process. So first off, the 13-inch, and as we go through all of these, we'll start off first with the specs on which model that I ended up going with. This guy has got the 2.3 gigahertz quad-core i5, the first time, finally, that a 13-inch MacBook Pro has a quad-core CPU, much needed, 8 gigs of RAM, and a 512 SSD. The baseline for $17.99 has 256 gigs of storage. Spend the extra $200, get 512, and also spec up the RAM to 16 gigs to make sure this guy stays around and you can use it for the next couple years as your main device. So although I love the form factor, I love this so much more than, say, the 15-inch, especially for traveling, especially if you're taking this to class every day. The 13-inch form factor is so much nicer. And now with the quad-core processor, I can successfully say I would recommend this to 90% of people out there that are looking to get their very first MacBook Pro, that are looking to do some basic editing, to do the things that most of us do. Browse the net, word process, everything that you can do on a laptop. I actually edited a bit of video on this guy, and although I am recording in 4K, this guy was perfectly fine. It did slow down sometimes, especially when scrubbing through timelines, and of course rendering times were a bit slower than these guys, but still a lot better than last year. And definitely if you're recording in 1080p and you don't have red footage, none of that 8K nonsense, I can wholeheartedly say this guy is perfect for a lot of you out there. If you do need that extra power though, and of course want a larger screen, this is where things get tough with the 15-inchers. So at very first glance, physically, these devices are identical. It's essentially what's happening on the inside is why there is such a price difference. This guy is the mid-range model, $2,800. This has got the 2.6 gigahertz 6-core CPU. It's also got 16 gigs of RAM, the 512 SSD, and of course the dedicated Radeon Pro graphics card. Whereas this behemoth has been upgraded, has been spec'd out to the max. We've doubled the RAM to 32 gigs. We've crammed a 4 terabyte SSD, the largest that you can get in a MacBook. And we now have the controversial i9 processor inside of this guy, depending on where you live. Up here, this guy was spec'd out close to $10,000. Down south of the border, you're looking at around $8,000, depending on sales tax, which is a ton of money for a laptop. So what makes this guy so expensive? The biggest thing, around $3,000, is the 4 terabyte hard drive. I would recommend that most people stay far and away. Stick to 512, maybe if you need upgrade to 1 terabyte, but you can get a lot of that for better value in something like this. A USB-C hard drive gets the job done, is just as quick, and you're saving yourself a lot of money. I get you have to carry around 2 things, but make the sacrifice. It is worth it. Don't get a 4 terabyte hard drive, please. But the big question here is, of course, that i9 processor. And my buddy Dave2D made a great video. I will leave it down below. Talks a bit more in depth and a bit more technical what's happening here. Essentially, the i9 is such a powerful chipset in this chassis, in this lovely form factor. The chip cannot cool down enough and we get throttling, overheating, which essentially means that this guy downgrades itself and cannot run at its full potential and gets very hot. But I will note though that I do run Final Cut across all of my devices, and I didn't find the throttling was as bad as, say, if you were running Premiere. To sum that up, if you're using Adobe Premiere to crunch through your edits, stay away from the i9 MacBook Pro. It will throttle like a... So in short, and to conclude, I would probably recommend the i7, upgrade the RAM from 16 to 32 gigs. You'll have a great experience over on this machine. If you're still eyeing the i9, if you still want to get 4 terabytes of space, you do have a ton of money to burn. You're a professional. I think Apple is still looking to tweak around software, not saying that it will fix everything, but perhaps when Mojave launches later this fall, some of the throttling issues will be resolved. We'll keep our fingers crossed. And of course, there is still that 13-inch MacBook Pro that I think a lot of people will overlook, but still get the job done just as good. Maybe not as quick as these two guys, but of course you get the smaller form factor. Super curious though to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. You've heard what I had to say. You heard which one that I would end up picking. Which one would you grab? Hope you guys enjoyed this video though, and I know a ton of you were asking about this wallpaper, which is also linked down below. I'll of course catch the rest of you in one of my next ones or in one of my vlogs. Peace.